What's going on, everybody? Barrett here with Spec of Tech. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about a pretty sweet little amplifier from Fosi Audio called the BT30D Pro. I have to admit, guys, this little thing impressed me. We are going to be doing some demos as well, so make sure that you stick around for that. First things first, I just want to say a quick thank you to Fosi Audio for sending this to me for review. And obviously, before we can talk about this little amplifier, let's get it out of the box, but it's going to be short and sweet. I just want to show you guys what it all comes with. All right, so in the box, pretty simple stuff. Got some styrofoam on the top to protect it. And then you got a little manual. You have the power adapter. And then you have a little Bluetooth antenna. All right, so now that we got this sweet little amplifier out of the box, you guys can see it doesn't come with a whole lot. It's just the amplifier, the power adapter, and the Bluetooth antenna. But that doesn't mean that it's not impressive. And the first thing that's impressive about this little amplifier is its price. It's only $89.99 US or $139.99 Canadian, and you actually get a lot of bang for your buck here. This amplifier is actually pretty simple. So on the front, you do have your on and off switch. As soon as you turn it on, it will be broadcasting Bluetooth so that you can connect to it via Bluetooth. And then you have some adjustments here for the subwoofer, putting out, I believe, 350 watts for a passive subwoofer. Why they decided to include that versus just having a subwoofer out or LFE out RCA, I don't know, but you are able to power a passive subwoofer with 350 watts with this thing, but it does not have a subwoofer out via RCA. And then besides that, you have your treble control, your bass control, and then your volume on the front. And I do like the fact that you have treble and bass control here because it is very handy for those of you that like a totally different sound. Some may want a warmer sound, some may want a cooler sound. That gives you the ability to just change the dials to your preference. Very easy. And then on the back of the amplifier, you have your line in, so left and right RCA line ins for any analog device that you want to plug in. Then you have your pre-out plug right there. And then you have your 3 binding posts. The reason there's 3 is because I already mentioned this actually will power a passive subwoofer. So you have your left channel, your right channel, and then your subwoofer. And when talking about wattage, the max wattage for the left and right channels is 175 watts into 4 ohms, and I believe it's somewhere around 100 watts into 8 ohms. But nonetheless, it is actually quite a bit of power to power your speakers. I actually plugged this in just to see if it could power my towers, and it was able to power my towers at pretty extreme volumes for such a small amp. All right, guys, before we talk about the most important thing, which is the sound and sound quality, and we're also going to do some demos, let's quickly cover the build quality. There's not much to cover here. The top sides, front, back, everything is made of metal. I believe it's aluminum, but everything's buttoned up really nicely. It's very firm. There's no soft spots or anything. And on the front of the amplifier, all the dials are made of metal as well. They're not a clicky sort of dial. They are just a smooth one. I have no complaints about the build quality. It's pretty simple design, but it works very well. It wasn't just the price that impressed me, it was also the sound quality. So let's talk about the sound quality. Now, I want to point one thing out is that I don't have a passive subwoofer, so I couldn't really test that aspect of this amplifier. So I was just testing it on my main speakers. But I figured, you know what? This little amp, my main question is it going to have enough power? So I decided, you know what? Instead of just plugging it into some bookshelf speakers and not really putting it to a full test, I plugged in my 4 ohm tower speakers, which are the Sonus Faber Sonetto 8s, and I use this amplifier to power those tower speakers. And you know what, guys? I was impressed. So first of all, I was impressed at the fact that it could drive my speakers at a pretty loud volume without clipping or without any sort of strain. And the second thing that impressed me is that it actually, if you turn up the bass dial a little bit, you can have some pretty solid bass coming out of this little amplifier, which is something I wasn't really expecting. I was kind of expecting that aspect to be lacking a little bit. Now, that said, you do have to turn up the dial if you do want to get some bass out of it. And there is a bit of a caveat there, or a bit of a downside, which I'll cover in just a little bit. But first, I want to let you hear it on your own. So I'm going to play some demos here, and I did record this with my binaural microphone. So you should be able to get a sense of the sound stage and everything using that microphone. So make sure that you are using a good set of headphones, because that's the only way to experience it properly. And as always, the demos come with a disclaimer, and that's that my recording equipment, my room, as well as the device that you're listening on will greatly affect the sound, and the fact that YouTube will compress the audio. So it's not an accurate depiction of what I'm hearing in my room, but it's about as good as I can get over YouTube. And lastly, I am only running the speakers. There's no subwoofers connected because I couldn't even connect my subwoofers to this if I wanted to, because I don't have a passive subwoofer. So it is just my 2 front speakers and this little amplifier driving them. And the first song is called Gentleman by J2X and Lou.
Honestly, that you were into me, guess you're not. I didn't realize your words are full of lies, not what I thought.
I hope you guys enjoyed those demos with the binaural microphone. Drop your comments down below if you were able to hear some of the sound staging with the binaural microphone recording. But let's talk about what I thought of the sound. Now, I wasn't expecting a whole lot from this amplifier, given the fact that it's, just a small amplifier that you can find on Amazon. I just didn't really have high expectations for this amplifier. But after plugging it into my tower speakers and cranking it up a little bit, I have to say that this little amplifier can deliver, and it does deliver. All right, before we get into detail on the sound quality of this little amplifier, I want us to keep a few things in mind. First of all, this amplifier is $90 US. And second of all, it's just a tiny little Class D amplifier that is kind of designed for using on a desktop or maybe even in a small room, but it's not really designed for what I was using it for. But the reason I wanted to do that is just to show you the capabilities of this little amplifier. So let's keep that in mind when I am talking about my impressions of this amplifier. Of course, it's not going to compete with the Tone Winner 81 PA amplifiers that I have powering my front stage now, but keeping in mind its price and keeping in mind what it is, this thing is impressive. All right, so let's start at the top with the treble. When I first plugged it in, I just left the dial turned all the way down, and I was quite impressed with the treble, even with the dial all the way down. It had a nice smooth presentation. It kind of just takes away any of the brightness that might be a little bit hard on your ears with the dial turned all the way down. So for those of you that like a smooth treble presentation, just turn the dial all the way down and this thing will deliver that for you. But then for those of you that might want a little bit of a boosted treble or a little bit more emphasis on the treble, which does give the illusion of a little bit more clarity and a little bit more clean top-end airiness, you can just turn that dial right up and this will provide that as well. That's why I love having the tone controls right on the front of this amplifier. You can custom tune this to exactly how you want it to sound and it will deliver whatever you want, really, which is fantastic to have in this little package. Now, when it comes to the mid-range, I would say that this kind of leans a little bit cool, on the cool side of things. It's not really one of those like rich, warm mid-ranges that some amplifiers can provide, like something like a Class A or something that just provides that characteristic on purpose. This amplifier, I would say, is on the flat to cool side on the mid-range. So for those of you that don't really like that heavy, rich kind of mid-range sound, this amplifier would be perfect for you. But if you do want a little bit more in the mid-range, you can just turn the bass up a little bit, which of course will give you a little bit in the mid-range, but not in the entire frequency range like you might expect, but that bass dial will help you out. And speaking of the bass, I left the dial all the way down at first and was completely unimpressed with the bass. There was just not much there. It was all just top end and a little bit of cool mid-range. Not much bass there. But you guys, you got to get on that dial a little bit for the bass. But once you do, this thing can pound. I'm not even joking, guys. That there is a caveat with that, which I'll get to in a second. But I had the bass turned up to probably about 50-60%. And that was kind of the sweet spot for me. It gave you a nice, clean, hard-hitting, tight bass and a little bit of rumble if you wanted it. If you do want a little bit more rumble, I did try it at about 75%, and it does give you quite a bit more. For those of you that do like a heavier bass presentation, this can deliver that as well. You have to keep in mind that this is just a little Class D amplifier. If you crank the bass all the way up, and you crank your volume all the way up, this thing's going to go into protection mode. I did a bit of a torture test just to see what it could handle with my tower speakers. Keep in mind that this is with my tower speakers, so I can't say that this would necessarily happen with a bookshelf. But if you are hooking up some big speakers and you're cranking the bass all the way up and cranking the volume all the way up, this will go into protection mode. So that brings me to who this amplifier is for. So in my opinion, this amplifier kind of suits the needs of a very specific demographic. It's not for those of you that want to hook this up to some big speakers and crank up everything and just have it hammering all day long. This amplifier is not made for that. It's not going to handle that. I would not recommend it for anybody that wants to use it for that purpose. Who this amplifier will work fantastic for is for those of you that are looking for an amplifier for maybe your computer desktop setup, or you have a small listening room and you don't like to crank your music to the nines or crank the bass to the nines. You just like to have a nice subtle music presentation in that room. This amplifier is going to work perfect for you. The sound is clean, it's crisp. Even the bass is nice and punchy. If you want it to be, again, you got to get on that dial a little bit, but it will give you that nice clean punchy bass and a little bit of rumble if you want it. Just don't crank it up all the way if you're going to have your volume cranked up all the way as well. So to sum it all up, is the amplifier perfect? Of course it isn't. It's not going to compete with multi-$1,000 amplifiers, guys. If that's what you're thinking I'm saying, that's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is for a $90 amplifier, you are getting some clean, crisp, hi-fi goodness that can provide you even with some nice, clean, tight bass for a very inexpensive price. So if you wanted to buy one of these for $90 and you wanted to buy yourself a pair of bookshelf speakers for your desktop for $100 or $200, you'd have yourself a pretty impressive hi-fi system at a very low cost, because this amplifier is going to deliver on a clean hi-fi experience, assuming that you're using it for what it's kind of designed for, which is for that smaller room or desktop setup. So all in all, I do love this amplifier. I'm probably going to use this on my own computer desk. I do have a Fosi Audio amp that I bought for myself, but it doesn't have quite as much power, and I don't find it to be quite as clean and crisp as this one. So I am going to be using this one on my desktop setup and getting rid of my old Fosi Audio amp because it is just that good. If you guys are interested in checking out this amplifier, there is, of course, links down in the description below. And if you would like to stay tuned for my future videos, consider subscribing, tick the bell icon if you do, and please take just one short second to hit that like button. I always do appreciate it. I would also appreciate it if you would consider supporting the channel. I do have a link for my Patreon down in the description below, or you can hit the join or thanks button right below this video. Remember to enjoy your systems. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.